They called her the sacrificed bride. 23 years old, orphaned, delivered to a duke twice her age to save her family from ruin. Everyone whispered that Thomas Harrow, Duke of Westmore, was too old, too cold, too scarred by loss to ever love again. What no one expected was the gift he would place in her trembling hands on their wedding night, a gift that would change everything she believed about duty, desire, and the man society called heartless. If this story touches you, subscribe to join us on this journey. Comment where you are listening from and leave a like to help others find this tale. Now let us step into early 19th century England, where everything is about to begin. The morning Edith Lane became a duchess, the sky above London wept as though it knew what she could not yet speak aloud. Rain streaked the windows of her childhood home, each drop a mirror to the tears she refused to shed in front of her stepmother's calculating gaze. 23 years old, unmarried, orphaned of her father just 8 months prior. These facts alone made her vulnerable, but it was the mountain of debt he had left behind that sealed her fate. Her stepmother had made it abundantly clear. Marriage to the Duke of Westmore was not a choice. It was survival. Edith stood before the mirror in her bedroom, watching as the maid fastened the last pearl button at her throat. The wedding gown was beautiful, she supposed. Ivory silk that caught the grey light, delicate lace at the sleeves, a train that would whisper across cathedral stones. It was also a costume for a role she had never auditioned for, a transaction dressed in white. "Your mother would have wanted this," her stepmother had said the night before, her voice dripping with false sentiment. "You will be a duchess, Edith. You should be grateful." Grateful. The word tasted like ash. Edith touched her reflection, her fingertips cold against the glass. The young woman staring back at her looked like a stranger. Where were the dreams she had nurtured in secret? The fantasies of marrying for love, of choosing her own path, of being seen as more than a pawn in someone else's game. Gone. Sold to settle debts she had not incurred, to a man she had never met. The carriage ride to the cathedral passed in a blur of grey streets and pitying glances from passers-by who somehow already knew. Word travelled fast in London society. The Lane girl marrying the Duke of Westmore. How desperate her family must be, how tragic for her. When the cathedral doors opened, the weight of 100 eyes fell upon her like stones. Edith forced herself to walk forward, each step echoing in the vast, cold space. The pews were filled with nobility, their faces a mixture of curiosity and cruelty. She heard the whispers, felt them like cuts across her skin. Poor thing, given to a man twice her age, the Duke of Westmore. So cold, they say. Hardly seems fair. She is pretty enough, but what good will that do her? He has not smiled in years. Edith kept her gaze fixed ahead, refusing to let them see her break. At the end of the aisle, standing beneath the arched stone and stained glass, was Thomas Harrow, the Duke of Westmore, her future husband. He was taller than she had imagined, broad-shouldered beneath his formal coat, his dark hair threaded with silver at the temples. 35 years old, the rumors said. A widower. A man marked by loss and wrapped in a reputation for coldness that preceded him like winter fog. But as Edith approached, what struck her was not cruelty in his face. It was exhaustion. His jaw was firm, his posture impeccable, but his eyes, dark and unreadable, held something she had not expected. Weariness. Perhaps even reluctance. He did not smile when she reached him. Neither did she. The ceremony began, words spoken by the bishop that felt hollow and distant, as though they were happening to someone else. Edith heard herself repeat vows she did not feel, promises she could not imagine keeping. Her voice sounded small in the enormous space, fragile against the stone and judgment. When it was Thomas's turn, his voice was steady, low and careful. He did not rush. He did not perform for the crowd. He simply spoke the words, his gaze never leaving hers, and in that moment, Edith felt something she could not name. Not warmth, not affection, but something other than indifference. Then came the moment everyone expected. The moment a husband claims his bride with a kiss before God and society. Thomas did not move. Instead, he inclined his head with a respect so deliberate it silenced the whispers. He reached for her hand, his touch firm but not possessive, and raised it briefly to his lips in a gesture that spoke of duty, not desire. The crowd murmured, disappointed. Edith felt the ring slide onto her finger, cold and heavy, a shackle disguised as gold. It is done, she thought. I belong to him now. But Thomas released her hand as quickly as he had taken it, and when she looked up at him, she saw no triumph in his expression, only something that looked unsettlingly like sorrow. The bishop pronounced them man and wife. The congregation rose. The organ swelled with music meant to sound joyous but felt anything but. Edith walked back down the aisle on the arm of a stranger, the weight of the ring pressing into her finger, the eyes of London society boring into her back. Outside, the rain had softened to a mist. The ducal carriage waited, black and imposing, a pair of matched horses stamping impatiently. Thomas handed her inside with the same careful formality he had shown at the altar, then took his seat across from her, not beside her. The door closed. The carriage lurched forward. Silence filled the space between them, thick and uncomfortable. Edith stared at her hands, at the ring that marked her as his. She thought of the life she had imagined, the one where she would marry a man who looked at her with longing, who whispered promises in the dark, who chose her because he could not imagine living without her. That life was gone. In its place was this, a carriage rolling toward a future she had not chosen, beside a man who wore his title like armor. I will be nothing but another piece of his legacy, she thought bitterly, a duty fulfilled, a wife in name only. He does not want me. He never did. But then, as the city gave way to open countryside, she felt his gaze on her. Edith glanced up, expecting coldness or detachment. Instead, she found Thomas looking at her with an expression she could not quite read. His jaw was tight, his hand gripping the head of his walking stick with enough force that his knuckles had gone white. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw something flicker across his face. Pain. He looked away quickly, turning his attention to the window, but the image stayed with her. The Duke of Westmore, the man society called heartless, holding on to his composure with the same desperation she felt in her own chest. The carriage rolled on, carrying them both toward Harrowmore Hall, toward a life neither of them had asked for, toward something neither of them could yet see coming. The journey north stretched through afternoon into evening, the landscape growing wilder with each mile. Edith watched forests give way to moorlands, the rugged beauty of Yorkshire unfolding beneath a darkening sky. Thomas spoke only once, asking if she needed to stop. His voice was courteous, careful. She declined, and silence returned like a third passenger between them. She studied him when she thought he was not looking. The strong jaw, the restless fingers that drummed once against his knee before stilling, the shadows beneath his eyes that spoke of burdens carried alone. He was handsome, she realized, not boyish but weathered and solid, strength earned rather than inherited. But handsome or not, he remained the man who had purchased her future. As sunset painted the moors amber and rose, the carriage turned onto a long drive. Edith's breath caught. Harrowmore Hall rose before them like something from a ghost story. Ancient dark stone absorbed the fading light. Ivy climbed in thick curtains. Dozens of windows stared like watchful eyes. Towers flanked the main structure, and beyond stretched gardens surrendering to wilderness. Imposing, intimidating, beautiful in a way that made her feel impossibly small. This is my home now, she thought, and the word felt foreign. Servants assembled before the entrance. Thomas descended first, then helped her down, his hand steady, his grip neither possessive nor distant. Their eyes met, and she saw something flicker, concern, perhaps apology, before he released her. The housekeeper came forward, a woman of perhaps 50 with sharp eyes. She curtsied deeply. "Your Grace, welcome to Harrowmore Hall. I am Mrs. Dawson. We are honored to serve you." The words were respectful, but Edith heard the assessment beneath them. "Thank you, Mrs. Dawson," she managed. Thomas gestured toward the entrance. "Mrs. Dawson will show you to your rooms. Dinner at 8, if that suits you." He spoke as though addressing a guest, not a wife. The interior matched the exterior's grandeur. High ceilings soared above carved beams. Portraits of generations lined the walls, their eyes following Edith with expressions ranging from proud to severe. Suits of armor stood sentinel. Tapestries depicted hunting scenes and family crests. Everything spoke of legacy, of bloodlines stretching back centuries. Edith felt like an interloper playing dress-up in a world that would never accept her. "Your chambers, Your Grace," Mrs. Dawson announced, opening a heavy oak door. Edith stepped inside and stopped. The room was enormous. A four-poster bed dominated the space, draped in burgundy velvet. Fire burned in the marble fireplace, casting dancing shadows. Thick carpets muffled her steps. Windows overlooked gardens stretching toward moorland. Beautiful, luxurious, utterly foreign. "I hope everything is satisfactory," Mrs. Dawson said. "Mary will serve as your lady's maid. If you need anything, pull the bell cord." "Thank you," Edith whispered. Alone, she walked slowly around the room, touching things to confirm they were real. The silk bed curtains, the cool marble mantelpiece, everything perfect, everything cold. A knock startled her. A young maid entered. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but His Grace asked me to bring this." She held out a cloth bundle. Edith unwrapped it slowly. Inside lay a shawl of deep blue wool, carefully mended in places, clearly well loved. A note was pinned to it. "The evenings here grow cold even in summer. This belonged to my mother. I thought you might find it comforting. T.H." Edith stared at the words, then the shawl. His mother's. Something personal, meaningful. Not jewels to display wealth, but practical comfort offered with quiet thoughtfulness. She lifted it to her face and breathed in lavender and old wood and history. Something shifted in her chest, small but undeniable. Perhaps the Duke of Westmore was not entirely the cold stranger society claimed. When dinner came, Mary helped her into pale green silk. Edith wrapped the blue shawl around her shoulders and descended through corridors that felt less hostile now. Thomas stood by the fireplace, wineglass in hand. When she entered, his gaze went immediately to the shawl. Something eased in his expression. "I hope you found your rooms comfortable," he said, pulling out her chair himself. "They are beautiful," Edith replied. "Thank you. And thank you for the shawl. I'm glad it suits you." He took his seat across polished mahogany and silver candelabras. "My mother was fond of it. I thought it might help this place feel less like a stranger's house." The admission surprised her. She looked at him properly and saw what she had not expected. Uncertainty. The Duke of Westmore, master of this vast estate, was uncertain how to welcome his unwanted bride. Dinner progressed through courses Edith barely tasted. She watched Thomas more than her plate, the methodical way he ate, how he paused before speaking, weighing every word, how his eyes strayed to her occasionally, then away, like someone stealing glances at something they did not believe they had the right to observe. He asked about her journey, about London, keeping conversation safe and shallow. She answered politely, asking about Yorkshire, the estate, anything to fill awkward spaces. Neither spoke of the marriage. Neither acknowledged the strangeness of strangers sharing dinner as husband and wife. When the meal ended, Thomas stood. "I imagine you must be exhausted," he said. "Mrs. Dawson will see you back. I have correspondence to attend to." He was giving her escape, she realized. "Yes," she said quietly. "It has been a long day." "Indeed." He inclined his head. "Sleep well, Edith." Her given name in his low voice sent unexpected warmth through her. "Good night, Thomas." His eyes widened slightly, but he said nothing more. He simply bowed and left, footsteps echoing until silence swallowed them. Back in her chambers, Mary helped her prepare for bed. The four-poster loomed vast and cold, despite the crackling fire. "Will there be anything else, Your Grace?" "No, thank you, Mary." The maid curtsied and slipped out. Edith stood alone in wedding night chambers, wearing a nightgown meant for a bride, in a bed meant to be shared. But Thomas did not come. Minutes stretched into an hour, then two. The fire burned lower. The house settled with creaks and whispers. He will not claim his rights tonight, she thought, relief and confusion mingling. She should be grateful. She was grateful. And yet some small part wondered why. Was she so undesirable? Or was there something else at play about the man she had married? Edith was about to extinguish the lamp when she noticed something on the dressing table. A small box covered in midnight blue velvet. Her heart raced as she approached, bare feet silent on carpet. She had not heard anyone enter. The maid must have placed it while she bathed. With trembling fingers, Edith opened the box. Inside, cushioned on ivory silk, lay a single silver key. Edith stared at the silver key resting on ivory silk. The firelight caught its surface, making it gleam with unexpected significance. Her hands trembled as she lifted it. The metal was cool, surprisingly light, beautiful in its simplicity. No elaborate scrollwork, just polished silver with delicate etching near the bow. But what did it unlock? Then she saw the folded paper hidden beneath, in the folds of silk. Her heart hammered as she retrieved it. The same handwriting from earlier covered the page. She moved closer to the lamp. The words made her world tilt. "My lady, this key is for your chamber door. The lock was installed this afternoon at my instruction. You alone decide when it is locked and when it remains open. You decide who may enter, including myself. I will not take what is not freely given. I will not demand what you are not willing to offer. No heart should be forced, no choice stolen in the name of duty or law. You are safe here. You are free here as much as any woman in your position can be free. When and if you choose otherwise, I will be honored. Until then, I remain at a respectful distance. Sleep well. Thomas Harrow." Edith read the words once, then again, her vision blurring with unexpected tears. A key, not to bind her, but to protect her. The power to lock him out, the choice to let him in. In a world where women were property, where marriage meant submission, where her family had sold her to settle debts, Thomas Harrow had given her something revolutionary: control, agency, choice. The tears spilled over. She pressed the letter to her chest. The key clutched in her other hand and sank onto the bed. For the first time since her father died, Edith wept not from fear or grief, but from relief so profound it shook her. She cried for the terrified girl she had been that morning. She cried for lost dreams. She cried because a man she expected to be cruel had instead offered kindness that felt like revolution. When the tears subsided, Edith looked again at the letter. Who was Thomas Harrow? Society called him cold. Her stepmother warned he would be demanding, entitled, perhaps cruel. The gossips painted him as hardened by loss, incapable of warmth. Yet this letter spoke of respect, patience, understanding what powerlessness meant. She walked to the door. A new lock gleamed in the firelight. She inserted the key and turned it. The bolt slid home with a quiet click that sounded like safety. She had a choice. For the first time in 8 months, Edith had a choice. She tested the mechanism again, marveling at the simple power it represented. Tonight, the door would remain locked. She needed time to understand this gift, to reconcile the man she married with the monster she had been told to expect. But as she climbed into bed, the key on the nightstand, Edith found herself thinking not of fear, but of curiosity. Who are you, Thomas Harrow? What made you give freedom instead of taking it? Sleep came easier than she had imagined possible. Morning arrived with pale sunlight. Edith woke and reached immediately for the key, confirming it was real. Mary appeared, helping her dress in soft lavender. The maid said nothing about the locked door or the key Edith slipped into her pocket, though her eyes held quiet approval. "Breakfast is served in the morning room, Your Grace," Mary said. "The morning room, please," Edith replied with unexpected decisiveness. She would not hide. She would face Thomas and somehow convey what his gift had meant. A footman guided her to the east-facing morning room, flooded with sunshine. The table was set for 2, but Thomas was not there. Mrs. Dawson appeared. "Good morning, Your Grace. His Grace wished me to inform you that he has ridden out to inspect the tenant farms. He did not wish to disturb your rest." Edith felt unexpected disappointment. "When do you expect his return?" "Not until late afternoon, I'm afraid. He takes these inspections quite seriously." The housekeeper lingered. "If I may say so, Your Grace, His Grace was quite particular about your comfort. He instructed the staff that you are to have complete freedom of the house and grounds." "That is very kind," Edith said softly. Alone with her tea, Edith considered the empty day. Thomas had ridden out early, giving her space, as his letter promised. She made a decision. If he had given her freedom of the house, she would use it. The library stole her breath, floor-to-ceiling shelves packed with leather-bound volumes, a ladder on rails, tall windows illuminating dancing dust. deep chairs near a massive fireplace, and a desk beneath the largest window. She moved through the room like entering a cathedral. Poetry, philosophy, agricultural treatises, scientific journals, history, novels. Many books bore annotations. She pulled down Wordsworth and opened it carefully. In the margins, that familiar handwriting. Thomas's thoughts on poetry. His mind laid bare on the page. The desk held organized stacks, correspondence, estate documents, sketches of crop rotation patterns. Where Thomas worked, where he spent private hours. A man who read poetry, who annotated philosophy, who cared enough about tenants to ride out in person and study agricultural improvements, not the cold aristocrat of rumor. Beyond the library, she found a music room with a well-maintained pianoforte and a portrait gallery where generations of Harrows stared down with varying severity. She paused before one portrait, a woman with kind eyes and a slight smile, wearing a blue shawl. Thomas's mother. The resemblance was clear in the strong features. But where Thomas seemed burdened by shadows, his mother's painted face held warmth. "Your Grace?" A young footman appeared. "His Grace has returned, though earlier than expected. He asked if you might join him in the garden." Her heart leaped. "Of course. Please tell him I will be there shortly." She paused in her chambers to retrieve the key, then hung it on a delicate chain around her neck, hidden beneath her gown. A reminder, a talisman, a promise not to forget what it represented. The gardens stretched behind the house in formal patterns, losing their battle with nature. Edith found Thomas near a fountain, coat discarded, sleeves rolled as he examined a rosebush with focused attention. He looked up, and something shifted in his expression, relief, perhaps pleasure. "My lady," he said, straightening, "I hope you slept well." "I did," Edith replied, "better than I expected." Their eyes met, and she knew he understood, that she had found the key, read his letter, that it had mattered. "Thank you," she added quietly, "for your thoughtfulness." Thomas's jaw tightened, emotion flickering before he controlled it. "You need not thank me for common decency." "It was not common," Edith said firmly. "It was extraordinary." He looked away, uncomfortable, and gestured toward the gardens. "Would you care to walk? The grounds are rather overgrown. My mother was the gardener. Since her passing, I have not had the heart to replace what she created." "I think it is beautiful," Edith said, "like something wild being gently tamed, not brutally controlled." Thomas glanced at her sharply, hearing more in her words than intended. They walked in silence, and Edith felt the weight of the key against her chest. The man beside her remained largely a mystery, but with each revelation, the letter, the books, the gardens he could not change, she saw glimpses of someone unexpected, someone worth knowing. The days that followed established a pattern as delicate as morning frost. Edith and Thomas circled each other with careful courtesy, building something neither could yet name. Each morning, Edith found small tokens left outside her door, a book of poetry with a page marked, a single flower from the overgrown gardens. Once, a detailed map of the estate with walking paths traced in ink, and a note in his handwriting. "These routes are particularly beautiful at sunset." She never saw him leave these gifts. He was always gone before she woke, attending to estate matters or riding the moorlands, but each offering spoke of attention, of someone observing what might bring her pleasure. In return, Edith began leaving her own silent replies. A sketch she had drawn of the view from her window. A note thanking him for the book, with her thoughts on the marked poem. Small gestures that said, "I see you seeing me." They took tea together most afternoons in the winter garden, a glass-enclosed room where climbing roses fought for space against the panes. The conversations remained careful, topics chosen for their safety. "Tell me about Yorkshire," she would say, and he would speak of the moors, the changing seasons, the hardy people who farmed the difficult land. "What do you read?" he asked once, and she surprised herself by answering honestly about her love of history, of stories where people overcame impossible circumstances. His eyes had sharpened with interest. "You admire resilience." "I must," she replied quietly. "I have little choice but to cultivate it myself." Something passed between them then, an acknowledgement of the circumstances that had brought her here. Thomas looked away first, his jaw tight. "You are stronger than you know," he said, so softly she almost missed it. The estate itself revealed more about Thomas than any conversation could. Edith continued her explorations, and everywhere she looked, she found evidence of a man who carried his responsibilities with quiet dedication. The tenant cottages were well maintained, their roofs sound, their chimneys drawing properly. She learned from Mrs. Dawson that Thomas personally inspected each property twice yearly, arranging repairs before they became crises. "He keeps a fund," the housekeeper confided one morning, "for medical emergencies. If a tenant family faces illness, he ensures they have access to physicians without docking their rent." "That is uncommonly generous," Edith said. Mrs. Dawson's stern face softened. "His Grace is uncommonly decent, if I may say so. The staff here would walk through fire for him. He treats us as people, not furniture." Another piece of the puzzle that was Thomas Harrow. One afternoon, Edith discovered an observatory tucked into the West Tower. It was clearly a private space. The door had been closed but not locked. She pushed it open with hesitant curiosity. The circular room was dominated by a telescope pointed toward the skylights above. Star charts covered the walls, some printed, others hand-drawn with meticulous care. Books on astronomy filled a small shelf. A worn armchair sat beside a table scattered with notebooks. She picked up one notebook and opened it carefully. Pages of observations, calculations, sketches of constellations. The handwriting was the same that left her morning notes, but here it was, looser, more personal. Occasional thoughts interrupted the scientific notations. Mother always loved Cassiopeia. I see why now. Constant, unchanging when so much else shifts and fades. The stars do not judge. They simply are. Would that humans possessed such grace. Edith's throat tightened. Here was Thomas in his most private moments, seeking solace in the certainty of celestial movements, finding comfort in things beyond human cruelty and loss. "You have found my refuge." She spun, heart leaping. Thomas stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. "I am sorry," she said quickly. "I should not have intruded." He shook his head, entering the room. "You are mistress of this house. Nothing is forbidden to you." "But this is yours," she protested. "Your private space." Thomas moved to the window, gazing out over the estate. "I have found that private spaces feel less lonely when someone else knows they exist." The admission hung in the air between them, vulnerable and honest. Edith replaced the notebook carefully. "You study the stars." "When I can sleep, which is not often." He glanced at her, something rueful in his expression. "The nights are long in this house." "Do you find peace here?" she asked. "Sometimes. The stars are predictable, constant. They follow laws that cannot be bent by title or wealth or expectation." He paused. "There is comfort in that." Edith understood. "I used to find similar comfort in books," she said. "Stories where the endings were already written, where I knew the heroine would survive her trials, and now I am living a story without knowing how it ends." Thomas turned fully to face her, his dark eyes serious. "That makes two of us, then." The moment stretched, charged with things neither could quite articulate. Then Thomas cleared his throat and gestured toward the telescope. "Would you like to see?" he asked. "The sky will not be clear until evening, but I can show you the charts, explain what I observe." Edith found herself smiling. "I would like that very much." They spent the next hour bent over star maps, Thomas's voice low and patient as he traced constellations, explained the movement of planets, shared the mythology behind the names. He stood close enough that she could feel the warmth of him, smell the faint scent of sandalwood and paper, and something uniquely him. When he reached across her to point out a particular notation, his arm brushed hers, and they both froze. The contact lasted only a heartbeat before he stepped back, but Edith felt it echo through her entire body. "Forgive me," he murmured. "There is nothing to forgive," she replied, and meant it. That evening, dinner felt different. The careful distance remained, but something had shifted beneath it. They sat at opposite ends of the long table, but their conversation flowed more easily. Thomas asked about her family, her childhood, the dreams she had harbored before duty intervened. She answered honestly, surprising herself with her candor. In return, he spoke of his parents, of growing up in Harrowmore Hall, of the weight of expectations that had shaped his life. "My father was a hard man," Thomas said, staring into his wine, "concerned with legacy, with propriety, with the Harrow name. When he died, I inherited not just the title, but the burden of being what he demanded." "And your mother?" Edith asked gently. His expression softened. "She was warmth in a cold house. She gardened because she said life should grow, not just endure. When she passed 5 years ago, I lost the only person who saw me as Thomas, not as the Duke." Edith's chest ached for him. That must have been terribly lonely. It was. He met her eyes across the candles and silver. It still is most days. The honesty in his voice pierced her. She wanted to reach for him, to close the distance between them, but the length of mahogany and the weight of propriety held her in place. After dinner, Thomas walked her to the base of the stairs leading to her chambers. "Thank you for today," he said, "for seeing my observatory, for not mocking my fascination with things beyond this earth." "I would never mock something that brings you comfort," Edith replied. "We all need refuges from the expectations placed upon us." His hand lifted, as though he might touch her face, but he caught himself and let it fall. "Sleep well, Edith. And you, Thomas." She climbed the stairs, aware of him watching, until she disappeared around the corner. In her room, she stood before the mirror and touched the chain around her neck, feeling the key hidden beneath her gown. The door remained locked each night, but the barrier felt less necessary now. Less like protection and more like habit. Thomas had not pressed, had not demanded, had given her time and space and small, careful pieces of himself. Who was this man who studied stars and tended tenants and carried loneliness like a stone in his chest? Edith was beginning to want to know everything. 3 weeks into their marriage, Edith woke to find a different kind of gift outside her door. Sheet music. Chopin, her favorite composer, though she had only mentioned it once in passing during tea. A note was tucked inside. "The pianoforte in the music room is yours to use whenever you wish. I would be honored to hear you play. T." She traced the words with her fingertips, warmth spreading through her chest. He listened. He remembered. He paid attention to details she barely recalled sharing. That afternoon, Edith made her way to the music room. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, illuminating the instrument that dominated the space. She had not played since leaving London, had not felt the freedom to claim anything in this house as truly hers. Until now. She settled onto the bench, arranged the music, and began to play. Her fingers were stiff at first, clumsy with disuse, but muscle memory returned. The notes filled the room, melancholy and beautiful, and she lost herself in the familiar comfort of creation. She did not hear Thomas enter, did not know he was there until the piece ended, and she looked up to find him standing in the doorway, his expression arrested, unguarded in a way she had never seen. "That was extraordinary," he said quietly. Edith felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I am out of practice. Then I cannot imagine how it sounds when you are not." He moved closer, stopping a respectful distance from the piano. "My mother used to play. I had forgotten how this room could feel alive with music. Would you like me to play something else?" The offer escaped before she could consider it too forward. "Please." He settled into a chair near the window, his long frame relaxing into the cushions. "Play whatever brings you joy." So she did. Piece after piece, some from memory, others sight-read from the music he had given her. She played while the afternoon light shifted and softened, while Thomas sat silent and attentive, his eyes never leaving her. When she finally stopped, fingers aching pleasantly, she found him watching her with an intensity that stole her breath. "Thank you," he said. "I have not felt this much peace in years." Something in his voice made her bold. "You are welcome here any time I play." His throat worked as he swallowed. "I would like that." The pattern shifted after that day. Edith played most afternoons, and Thomas appeared without announcement, settling into his chair by the window. Sometimes he brought correspondence to review, but mostly he simply listened. His presence a quiet comfort that made her music soar. They began taking longer walks through the estate. Thomas showed her the tenant farms, introduced her to families who regarded their duke with genuine respect rather than fear. She watched him discuss crop rotations with elderly farmers, admire children's accomplishments, Listen seriously to concerns about drainage or livestock. This was Thomas without the weight of title. Engaged, thoughtful, present. One afternoon, they walked to a meadow overlooking the moors. Wild grass rippled like water in the breeze, and the sky stretched endlessly above them. "This was my mother's favorite place," Thomas said. "She would come here to think, to escape the confines of the house." "It is beautiful," Edith replied, breathing in the scent of heather and earth. She said it reminded her that the world was larger than one estate, one title, one set of expectations. He paused, his gaze distant. "I think she felt trapped sometimes, despite loving my father." "The role of Duchess can be a gilded cage." Edith heard the question beneath his words. "Is that how you feel?" she asked gently. Thomas turned to her, and for once his careful control slipped. "I do not want that for you. I never wanted that for you." His voice roughened with emotion. "You deserve choice, Edith. You deserve to be courted, to be wanted for yourself, not bartered like property." The admission hung between them, raw and honest. "And what did you deserve, Thomas?" she asked, stepping closer. He looked startled by the question. "I deserved nothing. I accepted a marriage arrangement, same as countless men before me. But you did not have to be kind. You did not have to give me that key, or respect my boundaries, or leave me poetry and flowers." She was close enough now to see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. "You could have been cruel and been within your rights. Why were you not?" Thomas's hands clenched at his sides, as though restraining himself from reaching for her. "Because I know what it is to be powerless," he said roughly. "My father controlled every aspect of my life until he died. I swore I would never do that to another person, especially not to someone bound to me by law. So you gave me freedom. I gave you what I wished someone had given me." The vulnerability in his voice pierced her. Without thinking, Edith reached up and touched his face, her palm against his jaw, feeling the scratch of stubble and the heat of his skin. Thomas froze, his breath catching audibly. His eyes closed as though her touch caused pain and pleasure in equal measure. "Edith," he whispered, "you do not have to—" "I know," she interrupted. "I know I do not have to. That is why I choose to." His eyes opened, searching hers with desperate hope. "What are you saying?" "I am saying that I see you, Thomas Harrow. Not the Duke, not the title. You. And what I see is worth knowing, worth choosing." The words seemed to break something in him. His hand came up to cover hers where it rested against his face, pressing it closer as though to memorize the sensation. "I do not deserve your kindness," he said hoarsely. "Perhaps we both deserve more kindness than we have received." They stood like that, hands joined, breath mingling in the space between them. The world narrowed to this moment. The meadow, the sky, the man whose loneliness matched her own. Thomas pulled back first, though his hand lingered on hers. "We should return before dark," he said, voice carefully controlled once more. But as they walked back to the house, he offered his arm and she took it. The contact was proper, appropriate, but Edith felt the tension in his muscles, the awareness humming between them. That evening, Thomas appeared at her door, the first time he had done so since their wedding night. "May I come in?" he asked, and there was uncertainty in his voice that made her heart ache. "Of course." She stepped back, allowing him entry. He crossed to the window, hands clasped behind his back. "I wanted to apologize if I overstepped today, if my words or actions made you uncomfortable." "They did not," Edith said firmly. "Thomas, look at me." He turned, and she saw the fear in his eyes. Fear of rejection, of ruining what they had carefully built. "I am not uncomfortable," she continued. "I am grateful for your honesty, for your kindness, for treating me as though my choices matter. They do matter." His voice was fierce now. "You matter, Edith, more than you know." The air between them thickened with unspoken feeling. Edith's heart hammered against her ribs, the key heavy against her chest. "Will you have tea with me tomorrow morning?" she asked. "Not afternoon. Morning. Before you ride out." A slow smile transformed his face, making him look younger, lighter. "I would be honored." After he left, Edith stood in the center of her room, fingers pressed to her lips, pulse racing. The door was still locked, but for the first time, She wondered what might happen if she opened it. Not tonight. Not yet. But soon, perhaps, when she was ready. When the choice felt entirely her own. And the extraordinary thing was this. Thomas would wait. Would respect whatever decision she made, even if that decision was never. That knowledge made her want to choose him all the more. The letter arrived on a grey morning, 3 days after Edith had touched Thomas's face in the meadow. She recognized her stepmother's handwriting immediately, and dread settled in her stomach like a stone. Mrs. Dawson brought it with breakfast, her expression carefully neutral. "From London, Your Grace." Edith waited until she was alone to open it. The words were exactly what she had feared. "My dear Edith, I trust you are settling into your new role. Remember that your duty extends beyond mere presence. The Duke will expect an heir, as is customary. Do not be foolish or sentimental about such matters. Your family's security depends upon your success in this marriage." Your stepmother Edith crumpled the letter, anger and shame warring in her chest. Even here, hundreds of miles away, her stepmother's voice reached out to remind her that she was a transaction, a broodmare, a tool for securing wealth and position. The words poisoned what had been a peaceful morning. When Thomas appeared for their now customary morning tea, she could not hide her distress. "What has happened?" he asked immediately, setting down his cup. "You are troubled." "A letter from London," she said tightly. "Nothing of consequence." "Edith." His voice was gentle but firm. "We have been honest with each other thus far. Please do not stop now." She handed him the crumpled paper, watching his face darken as he read. When he finished, his jaw was set like granite. "This is unconscionable," he said quietly, rage vibrating beneath his controlled tone. "To reduce you to such terms, to presume to instruct you on matters that are deeply personal." "She is only saying what society expects," Edith interrupted bitterly. "What you are entitled to expect as my husband." Thomas stood abruptly, moving to the window with rigid shoulders. "I have never expected such things from you. I thought I had made that clear." "You have," she said, "but the world does not care what arrangements we have made privately. They see a marriage without an heir and assume failure. Assume I am failing." "You are not failing," Thomas said fiercely, turning to face her. "You are surviving circumstances not of your choosing with grace and dignity. That is triumph, not failure." The passion in his voice startled her. He crossed the room, stopping just before her, his hands clenched as though to keep from reaching out. "Listen to me, Edith. You owe that woman nothing. You owe society nothing. The only person you answer to is yourself." His eyes blazed with intensity. "And I will not have anyone, not even your family, making you feel lesser for choosing your own path." Tears pricked her eyes. "Why do you defend me so?" "Because you deserve defending." His voice softened. "Because I have come to care for you far more than is perhaps wise." The admission hung between them, heavy with meaning. "Thomas," she whispered, "I should not have said that." He stepped back, composure fracturing. "Forgive me. I have overstepped." "No." The word came out fierce. "Certain. You have not." Before courage could fail her, Edith closed the distance between them and took his hand. His fingers were warm, strong, and they trembled slightly in her grasp. "I care for you too," she said. "More than I expected to. More than I know what to do with." Thomas stared at their joined hands as though witnessing a miracle. "Edith, if you are saying this because of that letter, because you feel obligated, I am saying it because it is true." She squeezed his hand. "Because you have been patient and kind and honest. Because you see me as a person, not property. Because when I am with you, I feel less alone than I have in years." His free hand came up slowly, telegraphing the movement, giving her time to pull away. When she did not, he cupped her face with infinite gentleness, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. "You are not alone," he said hoarsely. "Not anymore." "Neither are you," she replied. Something shifted in his expression, hope, desire, and a question he was afraid to ask. Edith answered it by rising onto her toes and pressing her lips to his. The kiss was tentative at first, a whisper of contact that sent lightning through her veins. Thomas went absolutely still, as though any movement might shatter the moment. Then his hand slid into her hair, cradling her head, and he kissed her back with barely restrained hunger. It was nothing like she had imagined kisses would be. It was better, urgent, yet tender, passionate, yet respectful. He kissed her as though she were precious, as though he had been starving for this and could barely believe it was real. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Thomas rested his forehead against hers. "Tell me this is what you want," he said roughly. "Tell me I am not taking advantage of your distress." "You are not," Edith assured him. "Thomas, I am choosing this. I am choosing you." His arms came around her then, pulling her close, and she melted into his embrace. They stood like that for a long moment, hearts racing in tandem, the world narrowing to just the two of them. A knock at the door made them spring apart. Thomas ran a hand through his hair, looking charmingly disheveled, while Edith pressed her fingers to her swollen lips. "Enter," Thomas called, his voice remarkably steady. Mrs. Dawson appeared, tactfully averting her eyes. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but Lady Ashford has arrived for her visit." Thomas's expression darkened. "I had forgotten." "Who is Lady Ashford?" Edith asked. "A neighbor," Thomas said grimly. "A widow who fancies herself the arbiter of local society. She will have heard of our marriage and come to pass judgment." "Then we shall give her nothing to judge," Edith said, surprised by her own boldness. She straightened her shoulders. "Let her see a united front." Thomas's eyes lit with admiration and something warmer. Together, then. They descended to the drawing room where Lady Ashford waited, a woman of perhaps 45, elegant and sharp-eyed, her smile not quite reaching her gaze. "Your Grace," she said to Thomas, then turned to Edith with barely concealed assessment. "And the new Duchess. How charming. You are quite young, are you not?" 23, Edith replied evenly. "How interesting." Lady Ashford settled into her chair like a queen claiming a throne. "I must say the circumstances of your marriage were quite the talk of London. Such a hasty arrangement." "Necessary arrangements often are hasty," Thomas said coolly. "I saw no reason to delay when I had found what I wanted." His words, and the way his gaze lingered on Edith, made Lady Ashford's eyes narrow. "Indeed. And tell me, my dear, how are you finding Harrowmore Hall? It can be rather isolated for one accustomed to London society." "I find it peaceful," Edith said, "and I have been made to feel quite welcome. How fortunate." Lady Ashford's smile was acid-sweet. "Though I imagine there is pressure, given the need for an heir. Society does expect certain results from a marriage." The comment landed like a slap. Edith felt Thomas stiffen beside her, felt her own anger rise hot and sharp. But before Thomas could respond, Edith spoke. "Society expects many things," she said calmly. "Fortunately, His Grace and I concern ourselves with our own happiness rather than the opinions of strangers." She met Lady Ashford's gaze directly. "Our marriage is built on mutual respect and affection. Everything else will come in its own time." The room fell silent. Lady Ashford's expression flickered with surprise and grudging respect. Thomas's hand found hers beneath the table, squeezing gently. "Well," Lady Ashford said after a moment, "you are certainly spirited. Perhaps you will suit Harrowmore Hall after all." The visit ended shortly after, Lady Ashford departing with a thoughtful expression rather than the smug superiority she had entered with. As soon as the door closed behind her, Thomas pulled Edith into his arms. "That was magnificent," he said, pride and affection warming his voice. "You defended us both with grace and strength." "She deserved it," Edith replied. "No one speaks to you that way. Not while I am here." Thomas pulled back just enough to look at her, his expression tender. "I believe, Edith Harrow, that I am falling in love with you." The words should have frightened her. Instead, they felt like coming home. "Good," she whispered, "because I believe I am falling in love with you too." He kissed her again, slower this time, deeper, a promise of things to come. When they finally parted, Edith touched the key still hidden beneath her gown. Tonight, she thought. Tonight, perhaps, she would leave the door unlocked. The storm arrived 3 nights later, rolling across the moors with violent purpose. Lightning split the sky, thunder shook the ancient stones of Harrowmore Hall, and rain lashed the windows like fury given form. Edith stood in her chambers, watching the tempest transform the familiar landscape into something wild and unknowable. She had dismissed Mary early, wanting solitude, wanting to think. Since the kiss, since multiple kisses, stolen in hallways and gardens and quiet moments when the world narrowed to just the two of them, everything had changed. The careful distance they had maintained had collapsed into something urgent and consuming. Thomas looked at her now with undisguised longing. His hand would linger on hers during dinner. He found reasons to be near her, to touch her shoulder in passing, to brush hair from her face with infinite tenderness. And Edith found herself aching for more. The key still hung around her neck. The door still locked each night, but the barrier felt increasingly arbitrary, a habit rather than a necessity. Tonight, with the storm raging outside, Edith could not settle. She paced her room, too restless for sleep, too aware of her own heartbeat and the empty bed, and the man somewhere in this vast house who had promised to wait forever if needed. She made a decision. Wrapping a dressing gown over her nightgown, Edith unlocked her door and stepped into the corridor. Lightning illuminated her path as she moved through the sleeping house, drawn by instinct toward the library. She found him there, as though she had known she would. Thomas stood before the fireplace, still dressed despite the late hour, staring into flames that cast his face in harsh relief. He looked exhausted, haunted, like a man wrestling with demons only he could see. "Thomas," she said softly. He spun, eyes widening at the sight of her in her nightclothes, hair loose around her shoulders. "Edith, what are you doing here? Is something wrong?" "I could not sleep," she admitted. "The storm." Thunder crashed overhead, making them both flinch. "Come, sit by the fire," Thomas said, already moving to guide her to one of the deep chairs. "You are shivering." She had not realized she was. He draped a blanket around her shoulders, his hands lingering a moment longer than necessary. "Why are you awake?" she asked. "It must be past midnight." Thomas returned to the fireplace, bracing one hand against the mantel. "I do not sleep well on stormy nights. Too many memories of what?" He was silent so long she thought he would not answer. Then, quietly, "My mother died on a night like this. A fever that came on suddenly, that no physician could stop. I sat with her while the storm raged, holding her hand, helpless to do anything but watch her slip away." Edith's heart cracked for him. "Oh, Thomas. My father was already gone by then. I was alone in this house, master of everything and connected to nothing." He laughed bitterly. The great Duke of Westmore, with all his wealth and power, unable to save the one person who mattered. "You were not alone in that helplessness," Edith said. "We cannot control death, no matter our station." "No, but we can control how we treat the living." He turned to face her, his expression raw. "That is why I could not do to you what was done to me, could not cage you, demand from you, take from you what was not freely given, because you know how it feels to be powerless, because I swore the day she died that I would never make another person feel as trapped as I had felt my entire life." His voice roughened with emotion. "And then you arrived, this beautiful, frightened woman who had been sold to settle debts, and I saw myself in your eyes, saw that same desperate need for escape. So you gave me the key, so I gave you everything I could. Choice, freedom, time." He moved closer, his gaze intense. "But Edith, I need you to know, it was not only kindness, it was not only duty or pity or any noble sentiment. What was it then?" "It was desire." His voice dropped, intimate and rough. "From that first day, seeing you walk down that aisle with your chin high despite your fear, I wanted you, not as an obligation, not as a wife in name only, but as a woman I ached to know, to touch, to—" He broke off, jaw clenched. "To what?" Edith prompted, standing, letting the blanket fall away. Thomas's eyes darkened as he took in her form, barely concealed by thin fabric. "To claim," he admitted hoarsely, "to make mine in every way. To hear you say my name while I worshipped every inch of you." His hands fisted at his sides. "But I would not, could not. Not while you saw me as your jailer rather than your choice." "And now?" Edith stepped closer, her heart thundering louder than the storm. "How do you see me now?" "Now I see the woman I love. The woman I want so desperately I can barely breathe when you are near. The woman who has every right to leave this room and return to her locked door, and I would honor that choice, even as it destroyed me. Edith closed the remaining distance between them, placing her hands on his chest, feeling his heart race beneath her palms. "I did not come here to return to my locked door," she said clearly. "I came here because I am tired of sleeping alone. Because I want you too, Thomas. I have wanted you for weeks, and I am done pretending otherwise." His breath hitched. "Edith, you must be certain. If we do this, there is no going back." "I know." She rose on her toes, bringing her lips close to his. "I am choosing this. I am choosing you. Not because of duty or expectation or that letter from my stepmother. Because I love you. Because I want to be your wife in truth, not just in name." The words broke his control. Thomas surged forward, capturing her mouth with his, kissing her with all the pent-up longing and desire he had been holding back. His arms wrapped around her, pulling her flush against his body, and Edith gasped at the sensation, the hard planes of him, the heat, the evidence of his want pressing against her. "Are you sure?" he murmured against her lips. "Tell me you are sure." "I have never been more certain of anything." He lifted her then, cradling her against his chest as he strode toward the door. "Where are we going?" "Somewhere with a proper bed," he growled. "I will not take you on a library floor like some desperate boy. You deserve better. You deserve everything." He carried her through darkened corridors as lightning painted the walls silver. Edith buried her face in his neck, breathing in his scent, feeling the strength of his arms and the racing of his pulse. Thomas pushed open the door to his chambers, larger than hers, dominated by a massive bed hung with dark curtains. Fire burned in the hearth, casting everything in warm, amber light. He set her down carefully, as though she might break, and cupped her face in his hands. "Last chance," he said roughly. "If you want to stop, we stop. No judgment, no anger. Tell me now." In answer, Edith reached up and unfastened the dressing gown, letting it pool at her feet. Beneath, the nightgown was thin enough to reveal the curves of her body, the darkness of her nipples, the shadows between her thighs. Thomas made a sound low in his throat. Need and reverence mixed together. "You are so beautiful," he breathed, "so impossibly beautiful." His hands moved to her shoulders, sliding the straps of her nightgown down slowly, giving her time to object. When she did not, he pulled the fabric lower, baring her breasts to his gaze. Edith fought the urge to cover herself. No man had ever seen her like this, but Thomas looked at her as though witnessing something sacred. "Perfect," he murmured, bending to press a kiss to her collarbone, then lower. "Absolutely perfect." His mouth found her breast, tongue circling the peaked nipple, and Edith gasped at the pleasure that shot through her. Her hands tangled in his hair, holding him close, and he took his time, lavishing attention on one breast, then the other, until she was trembling. "Thomas," she breathed, "please, please, what, love? Tell me what you want. I want to see you. Touch you." He straightened and began unfastening his shirt with hands that shook slightly. Edith helped, eager now, pushing the fabric from his shoulders to reveal the breadth of his chest. The muscles earned through years of riding and labor, the scars that spoke of a life fully lived. She touched him wonderingly, tracing the contours, feeling him shudder beneath her exploration. "You undo me," he said hoarsely. "Good," she replied, emboldened by his response. "I want to." He backed her toward the bed, lowering her carefully onto the mattress. The nightgown came off completely, leaving her bare before him. Thomas stood for a moment, drinking in the sight, his chest heaving. Then he was beside her, hands and mouth everywhere, tracing her ribs, cupping her breasts, sliding down her stomach to the place between her legs that ached with unfamiliar need. When his fingers found her wetness, they both groaned. "So ready for me," he murmured against her throat. "God, Edith, you feel like heaven." He touched her with expertise born of experience and patience, learning what made her gasp, what made her arch into his hand. The pleasure built slowly, inexorably, until Edith was writhing beneath him, desperate for something she could not name. "Thomas, please, I know, love. I know what you need." He positioned himself above her, still partially clothed, and she felt the hard length of him pressing against her entrance. "This might hurt at first," he warned. "Tell me if you want me to stop." "Do not stop," she commanded. "Do not you dare stop." He entered her slowly, carefully, and there was pain, a sharp burning that made her tense. Thomas froze immediately. "Breathe," he instructed gently. "Just breathe. The pain will pass." She did, focusing on his face, on the love and concern in his eyes. And gradually her body adjusted, the pain fading into something else, something fuller, something right. "Better?" he asked. "Yes." She shifted her hips experimentally. "Yes, better. Move, Thomas, please move." He did, slowly at first, watching her face for any sign of discomfort, but there was only pleasure now, building with each thrust, each slide of his body within hers. They found a rhythm together, urgent and primal, and Edith understood finally why people called this union. They were no longer two separate beings, but something merged and whole. When the pleasure crested, breaking over her in waves that stole her breath and scattered her thoughts, she cried his name. Thomas followed moments later, his own release accompanied by a groan that sounded like prayer and triumph combined. After, they lay tangled together, hearts slowing, bodies cooling. Thomas pulled her close, pressing kisses to her temple, her cheek, her lips. "I love you," he whispered. "I will love you until the stars burn out and the world ends." "I love you too," Edith replied, tracing his jaw with gentle fingers. "My choice, my husband, mine, yours," he agreed, "always yours." Outside, the storm still raged, but inside Thomas's chambers, wrapped in his arms with the key no longer needed between them, Edith had never felt safer or more cherished. This was freedom, this was choice, this was love. Edith woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows, and the warmth of Thomas's body curved around hers. His arm lay draped across her waist, his breath stirring the hair at her temple, and for a moment she simply existed in the perfection of it, the quiet morning, the man she loved, the choice she had made. She shifted slightly, feeling the pleasant ache in her body that spoke of the night's intimacy. Thomas stirred immediately, his arm tightening around her. "Good morning," he murmured, his voice rough with sleep and affection. "Good morning," she replied, turning in his embrace to face him. In the morning light he looked younger, the lines of care and loneliness smoothed away. His hair was disheveled from her fingers, his jaw darkened with stubble, and his eyes held a tenderness that made her heart swell. "How do you feel?" he asked, genuine concern in his voice. "Are you in pain?" "A little sore," she admitted, "but happy. So incredibly happy." Relief flooded his expression. "I worried I might have hurt you." "I tried to be gentle, but—" "You were perfect," Edith interrupted, pressing a finger to his lips. "Last night was perfect. You are perfect." He captured her hand and kissed her palm, the gesture intimate and possessive. "I have never felt anything like that," he confessed. "The connection, the trust, the way you gave yourself to me. Edith, I have been with women before, but this was different. This was love," she supplied. "This was love." "Yes." He pulled her closer, burying his face in her hair. "Love changes everything." They stayed like that for a long while, wrapped in each other in the morning quiet, until a knock at the door shattered the peace. "Your Grace?" Mrs. Dawson's voice carried clear disapproval. "Breakfast is ready when you are." Thomas groaned. "The world intrudes already." "Let it," Edith said, surprising herself with her boldness. "Let them all know. I am not ashamed of where I spent the night or who I spent it with." He pulled back to look at her, admiration and desire mingling in his gaze. "You are extraordinary, do you know that?" "I am beginning to believe it," she replied. After they dressed, Thomas in fresh clothes, Edith in the nightgown and dressing gown she had worn from her room, they descended to breakfast together. The staff's carefully neutral expressions spoke volumes. They knew. Of course they knew. But instead of shame, Edith felt pride. She had chosen this, had chosen him. And she would not hide that choice. Over tea and toast, Thomas reached across the table and took her hand openly, a gesture he had always avoided in front of the servants before. "Move your things to my chambers today," he said. "I will not have you sleeping apart from me again." "What will people say?" Edith asked, though she was already nodding. "Let them say what they wish. You are my wife, my duchess, and I love you too much to pretend otherwise for the sake of propriety." "Then yes," she agreed. "I will move my things." Mrs. Dawson appeared in the doorway, her stern expression cracking into something almost like approval. "Very good, Your Grace. I will have Mary begin immediately." The household shifted around them, accommodating this new reality. Edith's belongings were transferred to Thomas's chambers, now their chambers. The staff smiled more openly. The house itself seemed lighter, as though freed from the weight of two people living separate lives under one roof. That afternoon, Thomas found Edith in the library, surrounded by books she was cataloguing for her own amusement. "Come with me," he said, offering his hand. "I want to show you something." She took his hand without hesitation, and he led her up to the observatory. The afternoon sun streamed through the skylights, illuminating the star charts and telescopes. "Tonight," Thomas said, moving to adjust the instrument, "there will be a clear sky. I want to show you the stars properly. Not just charts and theories, but the real thing." "I would love that," Edith said. He turned to her, and the expression on his face made her breath catch. "I want to share everything with you now. My work, my passions, my fears, my hopes. I have spent so long keeping people at a distance, but with you, you do not have to," she finished. "Distance feels impossible now. Impossible and undesirable." He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "I find I cannot keep my hands off you." "I have the same affliction," Edith admitted, rising on her toes to kiss him. The kiss deepened quickly, hunger rekindling despite the night they had shared. Thomas's hands roamed her body with growing confidence, and Edith melted into his touch, amazed at how natural this felt, how right. "We should stop," Thomas murmured against her mouth, even as his hands continued their exploration. "It is the middle of the afternoon. Is that against some rule?" Edith asked breathlessly. "Probably." He grinned, that rare expression transforming his face. "But I find I do not care." "Then do not stop," she commanded. He lifted her onto the desk, scattering star charts, and positioned himself between her thighs. They came together with less urgency than the night before, but no less passion, learning each other in daylight, exploring what brought pleasure, what made the other gasp or moan or clutch desperately. Afterward, disheveled and flushed, they rearranged their clothing and attempted to restore some semblance of dignity. "I cannot believe we just did that," Edith said, laughing breathlessly. "I can," Thomas replied, kissing her soundly. "And I intend to do it again. Often. In every room of this house, if you will allow it." "Scandalous," she teased. "Delightfully so." He tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "You have awakened something in me I thought long dead. Joy. Hope. The desire to live rather than merely exist." "You have given me the same," Edith said seriously. "You saved me, Thomas, not just from an unhappy marriage to someone cruel, but from a life where I had no power, no choice, no voice. You gave me all of those things. We saved each other," he corrected gently. "I was drowning in loneliness before you arrived. Now I have a reason to wake each morning, to hope for the future, to believe in happiness." They spent the rest of the afternoon together, sometimes talking, sometimes in comfortable silence, sometimes stealing kisses that threatened to escalate into more. The estate could run itself for a day, Thomas declared. Today belonged to them. That evening, true to his word, Thomas brought her back to the observatory after dark. He positioned her before the telescope and adjusted it carefully. "Look," he instructed. Edith peered through the lens and gasped. Stars filled her vision, impossibly bright and close, clusters and nebulae she had never imagined existed. "It is beautiful," she breathed. Thomas stood behind her, his arms coming around her waist, his chin resting on her shoulder. "That is Jupiter," he said, pointing. "And there, that cluster is the Pleiades. The ancient Greeks called them the Seven Sisters." "Tell me their story," Edith said. So he did, spinning myths and legends while the stars wheeled overhead, his voice low and intimate in the darkness. Edith leaned back against him, feeling the solid warmth of his body, the steady beat of his heart, the quiet contentment of being exactly where she belonged. When they finally retired to their shared chambers, Thomas undressed her slowly, reverently, as though unwrapping something precious. They made love again, slower this time, savoring each touch, each kiss, each whispered endearment. "I love you," Thomas said as they lay tangled together afterward. sweat cooling on their skin. "I will spend every day of my life ensuring you never regret choosing me." "I could never regret this," Edith replied, tracing patterns on his chest. "You are the best thing that has ever happened to me, Thomas Harrow, the absolute best." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Sleep now, love. Tomorrow we begin our real life together." Edith drifted off, wrapped in his arms, the silver key lying forgotten on the nightstand, no longer needed, no longer relevant. The door stood open. Her heart stood open. And the man who had given her freedom had become the person she most wanted to choose, over and over again for the rest of her life. In the darkness, Thomas held her close and marveled at the miracle of it. He had been prepared to live alone forever, to honor his promise of distance and respect, to want without having. Instead, he had been chosen, loved, given the greatest gift, a partner who saw him, truly saw him, and loved what she found. "Thank you," he whispered into her hair, though he was not sure who he was thanking. The universe, perhaps. Fate. The storm that had driven her to his library. Whatever forces had conspired to bring this woman into his life and his arms. "Thank you." Outside, the stars continued their ancient dance, bearing witness to two souls who had found each other in the darkness and chosen to walk together into the light. 6 weeks after the storm that changed everything, Harrowmore Hall had transformed. Music drifted through corridors that had known only silence. Windows stood open to let in fresh air and sunlight. The gardens, while still wild, showed signs of careful tending, roses pruned, paths cleared, beauty emerging from neglect. The change was not only physical. The servants moved with lighter steps, smiled more freely, spoke with warmth rather than careful neutrality. They had watched their duke come alive, had seen the new duchess claim her place, not through demand, but through genuine care and partnership. And everyone knew why. Edith woke each morning wrapped in Thomas's arms, their bodies fitted together with the ease of long practice. They breakfasted together, discussing estate matters and books and plans for the day. He consulted her on decisions about the property, valuing her insights, trusting her judgment. She was no longer a guest in this house, she was its heart. One morning, Thomas appeared with a ledger and a sheepish expression. "I need your help," he admitted, settling beside her in their private sitting room. "The household accounts are a disaster. My steward manages the estate finances well enough, but the house itself, I have been neglecting it." Edith took the ledger and scanned the entries, her practiced eye quickly identifying the problems. "This is simple enough to fix. You just need better organization and someone to review expenditures regularly, would you?" His hand covered hers. "Would you take this on? I trust no one more than you." "Of course," she said, pleased by his confidence. "I managed my father's household before everything changed. I would be happy to manage ours." The word resonated between them, warm and right. Edith threw herself into the work with enthusiasm she had not felt in months. She met with Mrs. Dawson, reviewed budgets, identified waste and necessary improvements. The housekeeper, initially wary, quickly warmed to Edith's practical approach and genuine interest in the staff's welfare. "The servants need better quarters," Edith told Thomas one evening. "The attic rooms are drafty and cold. We should insulate them before winter." "Whatever you think best," Thomas agreed immediately. "Draw up the plans and costs. We will make it happen." She kissed him, grateful for his trust, and he pulled her into his lap with a grin that still made her pulse race. "I have created a monster," he teased. "You are running my estate better than I ever did." "Our estate," she corrected. "And I'm only organizing what you built. You care for these people, Thomas. I'm simply ensuring that care is systematic rather than sporadic. We make a good team." "We do," she agreed, then kissed him more thoroughly, the ledgers forgotten as his hands slid beneath her skirts. They christened the sitting room that afternoon, then the library that evening, giggling like conspirators as they straightened their clothes when Mrs. Dawson knocked with tea. Visitors began calling more frequently, curious about the transformed Duke and his young bride. What they found surprised them, not a cold marriage of convenience, but genuine affection and partnership. Lady Ashford returned, her sharp eyes missing nothing, As Thomas and Edith sat close together on the settee, his hand resting possessively on her knee, her fingers playing absently with his. "You seem well settled," Lady Ashford observed, her tone grudging but sincere. "We are," Edith replied, meeting the older woman's gaze steadily. "Very well indeed." The neighborhood slowly accepted what society had declared impossible, that a marriage born of necessity could become one of love. One afternoon, Thomas found Edith in the garden, tending the rose bushes with dirt on her hands and joy on her face. "My mother would have loved you," he said, settling on the bench beside her. "She always said gardens needed patience and hope. You have both." "I hope I would have loved her too," Edith replied. "She raised an extraordinary son." He pulled her close despite her protests about dirt, kissing her thoroughly. "I am the fortunate one. You could have closed your heart to me forever. Instead, you gave me everything." "You earned it," she said simply. "Every day you earn it." That evening, as they dressed for dinner, Edith felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. She gripped the bedpost, breathing carefully until it passed. Thomas was at her side immediately, concern darkening his face. "What is wrong? Are you ill? Just dizzy for a moment." It passed. She smiled reassuringly. "I am fine." But over the following days, the dizziness returned. Her body felt different, breasts tender, appetite shifting, a bone-deep fatigue that had her napping in the afternoon sun like a cat. She knew what it meant. Had known, perhaps, before her body confirmed it. One morning, Edith woke to nausea so intense she barely made it to the wash basin. Thomas held her hair back, his hand rubbing soothing circles on her back, murmuring comfort. When the sickness passed, she leaned against him, trembling. "This is more than simple illness," Thomas said carefully. "Edith, could you be—" "I think so," she whispered. "I think I am with child." His sharp intake of breath was audible. He turned her gently to face him, his hands cupping her face, his eyes searching hers. "Are you certain?" "Not completely." "But all the signs—" "Yes, I think I am." Thomas stared at her for a long moment, expression unreadable. Then slowly, wonder bloomed across his face like sunrise. "A child," he breathed. "Our child. Are you happy?" Edith asked, suddenly uncertain. "I know we have only been truly married for a short time, and perhaps it is too soon." "Too soon?" He laughed, the sound full of joy and disbelief. "Edith, you have given me everything I never dared hope for. Love, partnership, purpose. And now this." He placed his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "This is not too soon. This is perfect." Relief flooded through her, followed by happiness so intense it brought tears. "I was afraid you might think it was too fast, that we needed more time." "We have all the time in the world," Thomas said, pulling her close, "and I want to spend every moment of it with you, building our family, our life, our happiness together." They held each other as morning light filled their chambers, as birds sang in the gardens below, as the future they were creating together became tangible and real. Later, after a physician confirmed what they already knew, Thomas became almost comically protective. He hovered, worried about her lifting anything heavier than a teacup, insisted she rest constantly. "I am with child, not dying," Edith protested with amused exasperation. "Women have been doing this since the dawn of time." "Not my woman," Thomas replied stubbornly. "Not carrying my child. You will rest and eat properly, and let me take care of you." "You already take care of me," she said softly. "Every day in 1,000 ways. Then I will take care of you in 1,001 ways," he countered, kissing her forehead. They told the staff together, and the household erupted in genuine celebration. Mrs. Dawson actually smiled, a rare sight that made Thomas laugh. The cook prepared Edith's favorite foods. The maids treated her like precious porcelain. That evening they sat together in the winter garden where they had taken so many afternoon teas. Thomas's hand rested on her stomach, his expression one of wonder. "I cannot believe this is my life," he said quietly. "Months ago, I was alone, resigned to loneliness, going through the motions of existence. Now I have you, and soon we will have a child, a family." "You were never meant to be alone," Edith said. "You were meant for this, For love, for fatherhood, for happiness? You just needed someone to see past the armor you wore. You saw me, he said. When everyone else saw the cold Duke, you saw Thomas, the man beneath the title. And you saw me, she replied, not as property or obligation, but as a person worthy of choice and respect. We saved each other, Thomas said, echoing words from weeks before. We did, Edith agreed. And now we build something new, something beautiful. He kissed her as the sun set beyond the windows, painting their future in shades of gold and rose. In his arms, with his child growing inside her, surrounded by a home that finally felt alive, Edith understood what she had not believed possible on her wedding day. This was happiness. Real, lasting, chosen happiness. And it was only the beginning. 3 years later. Autumn painted Harrowmore Hall in shades of amber and crimson, the gardens now lovingly restored under Edith's careful direction. The wild beauty remained, but tamed with purpose. Roses climbed trellises, herb gardens flourished near the kitchen, and a new maze delighted visitors who came regularly now to visit the Duke and Duchess of Westmore. Inside the library, where everything had truly begun, Edith sat in the window seat with a book open on her lap, though she was not reading. Instead, she watched her daughter toddle across the carpet toward her father. Catherine Rose Harrow, named for Thomas's mother, had arrived on a spring morning 2 years prior with her father's dark eyes and her mother's determined spirit. At 18 months old, she ruled Harrowmore Hall with the absolute authority only a beloved child could command. "Papa," she cried, stumbling into Thomas's waiting arms. He caught her easily, lifting her high until she shrieked with delighted laughter. "There is my girl," he said, settling her on his lap. "Have you been helping Mama read?" "Read," Catherine agreed enthusiastically, though her version of reading involved mostly turning pages and pointing at pictures. Edith watched them together, her heart so full it ached. Thomas had transformed even more dramatically than the house, the shadows gone from his eyes, laughter coming easily, his entire being radiating contentment. He caught her gaze and smiled, that private smile reserved only for her. "What are you thinking?" he asked. "That I am impossibly happy," she replied honestly, "that I never imagined life could be like this." Neither did I. He shifted Catherine to one arm and reached for Edith's hand. "Come here." She moved to sit beside them, and Thomas pulled her close, their daughter between them, a perfect unit. "This," he said quietly, "is everything I never knew I needed. You, Catherine, this life we have built." "Do you remember the day we married?" Edith asked. "How miserable we both were." "I remember thinking I was trapping you," Thomas said, "that I was no better than your stepmother despite my intentions. The guilt nearly destroyed me, and I remember thinking you would be cold and cruel, that I would spend my life as an ornament in a cage." She touched his face, the gesture as natural now as breathing. "We were both so wrong." Catherine squirmed, demanding down, and they released her to toddle toward her toys. The moment of adult conversation would be brief. Parenthood had taught them to see such moments when they came. Thomas stood and walked to the desk, retrieving something from a drawer. When he returned, he held a familiar object, the silver key on its delicate chain. "I found this in your jewelry box this morning," he said. "Do you remember what it represents?" "Freedom," Edith replied immediately. "Choice, the beginning of everything." He pressed it into her hand, closing her fingers around it. "Keep it," he said, "not as a reminder of what you needed protection from, but as a symbol of what we chose. Every day, we choose each other. Every day, we choose this love." Tears pricked Edith's eyes. "We do," she whispered, over and over. "We choose this." A knock at the door interrupted the moment. Mrs. Dawson appeared, her stern expression long since softened into something approaching fondness. "Begging your pardon, Your Grace, but Lady Ashford has arrived for tea. Shall I show her to the winter garden?" "Please," Edith said. "Tell her we will join her shortly." After the housekeeper departed, Thomas helped Edith stand, his hand lingering on her waist. "Are you feeling well?" he asked. "You have been tired lately." Edith smiled, placing her hand over his on her stomach. "I am well." "Very well indeed." His eyes widened with understanding. "Edith, are you—" "I think so," she confirmed. It is early yet, but yes, I believe we will have another child. Joy transformed his face. The same wonder he had shown the first time. Another blessing, he breathed, another gift. They held each other while Catherine played at their feet, while afternoon sun streamed through the windows, while the life they had built together expanded to hold even more love. Later, after tea with Lady Ashford, who had become an unlikely friend and ally, after Catherine had been put down for her nap, Thomas and Edith walked through the gardens hand in hand. They stopped at the meadow where Edith had first touched his face, where vulnerability had cracked open something neither of them could deny. "Do you ever regret it?" Thomas asked suddenly. "Choosing this life? Choosing me?" "Never," Edith said fiercely. "Thomas, you gave me everything, not just comfort or security, but agency, voice, the right to be myself. How could I regret that? I gave you a key," he said. "You gave me a reason to live." "We gave each other freedom," Edith corrected. "You freed me from fear and powerlessness. I freed you from loneliness and resignation. We saved each other." He pulled her close, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you, Edith Harrow. More with each passing day. And I love you," she replied. "My choice. My husband. My home." They walked back to the house as the sun began to set, painting Harrowmore Hall in shades of gold. Inside, their daughter would wake and demand their attention. The estate would require decisions. Life would continue its gentle demands, but they would face it all together, not as strangers bound by obligation, but as partners bound by love and choice, and the simple miracle of having found each other in the darkness. Years later, when Catherine was old enough to understand, Edith would tell her daughter the story of the silver key, would explain that love built on freedom and respect and choice was the strongest kind, would show her that even arrangements born of necessity could transform into something beautiful if both people chose to see each other as human first, always. And Catherine would carry that lesson forward, as would her younger siblings, who would arrive in due time, filling Harrowmore Hall with laughter and love and the sound of a family that chose each other daily. The silver key remained in Edith's jewelry box, a relic of darker times and the beginning of light. She would take it out sometimes, running her fingers over the smooth metal, marveling at the journey it represented, from transaction to partnership, from duty to desire, from cage to freedom, from loneliness to love. Thomas had given her a key when he could have taken everything. In return, she had given him her heart when she could have remained forever closed. And together, they had built a life that neither had dared dream possible, a home that breathed, a love that endured, a future bright with promise. This was their story, not of a bride delivered to a duke, but of two people who saved each other and chose every single day to continue choosing love. And they lived truly and completely, happily ever after. In the end, what transformed a desperate arrangement into lasting love was not wealth or beauty or circumstance, but something far simpler and infinitely more powerful. The choice to see another person as fully human, deserving of agency and respect. Thomas gave Edith freedom when the world had taken it away. Edith gave Thomas purpose when loneliness had hollowed him out. And together, they proved that love need not begin with passion to end in devotion, that sometimes the strongest foundations are built on respect, patience, and the courage to be vulnerable. The silver key remains a reminder that the greatest gift we can offer another person is not control, but choice. And that real love begins when someone refuses to take what they have every right to claim, choosing instead to wait until it is freely given. May we all be so fortunate as to find someone who sees our chains and offers us keys instead. If this story touched your heart, please leave a like. It helps others discover stories about love that heals rather than harms. Subscribe to join us for more tales of resilience, redemption, and romance. And comment below to let me know where in the world you are listening from. I love hearing from you. Thank you for spending this time with Edith and Thomas. Until our next story, may you always choose love that liberates rather than imprisons.